Everyone, Mr. Foster here, and we're gonna pick back up with Othello. So, since in the last video we kind of got all of the introduction stuff, out of the way, settings, characters, motives, plot, all that. We're just gonna kind of start right where we left off on if you've got your book 1459. So we're still in Act 1, Scene 1, but tonight in this update, what is it? It's about 5:45 right now. So tonight in this update, we will get to Act 2, right? So Act 1 has three scenes in it, and essentially we're going from page 1459 to page 1473, which is where Act 2 begins, okay? So, let's pick it back up where we left off. So, just a quick recap. The play opens with Iago and Rodrigo, who are essentially, if you remember from last time, they're like Pinky and the Brain. So, Iago is the brain and Rodrigo is Pinky, right? So, we're picking back up with them, and Iago is talking to Rodrigo and he is not very happy, right? So Iago is not very happy with Othello. So keep in mind, Iago is essentially Othello's right-hand man, like his most trusted confidant, all this stuff. And Iago is mad because Othello has selected the Florentine Michael Cassio to be his lieutenant instead of Iago, right? So, we talked about in the last video some important lines here toward the beginning of the play where Iago says stuff like, I serve him that serve my turn upon him. And he tells Rodrigo, I am not what I am, right? So we get this very kind of sinister and manipulative language from Iago very early on in the play, right? So we learn that Iago is only looking out for himself, right? He says that he is Othello's most trusted person, his ensign, but we see in the beginning that really Iago is very two-faced, right? He will say that he is Othello's most trusted friend, but in reality, he is scheming up a plot to get Othello in trouble, right? So remember, Othello is a Moor, which is, basically an old term that white Europeans would call anyone who is not a white European. So Rodrigo, Iago, Senator Brab, Desdemona, they're all Venetians. They're all, white Europeans. Othello is a Moor. He is not white. I can't remember if it ever specifically says where he is from, but he is kind of like a foreign person in the cast, right, compared to everyone else. And another little fun tidbit, they actually never refer to Othello by his name, I don't think. They only ever call him the Moor, right? That's the only way any of the other characters ever refer to Othello in the play. So let's pick back up. We remember that where we stopped, um, Rodrigo and Iago have a plan that they're going to go wake up Senator Brab, and they're going to do this by literally just shouting at his bedroom window from the street, right? So they say, sir, sir, there's thieves, sir, awake. So Senator Brab wakes up and he's like, what are you two, why are you two yelling at me from the street? He recognizes Rodrigo and he says, Rodrigo, I told you to leave my family alone. You can't be with my daughter. And basically, Rodrigo says, "Sir, listen to me." And Iago says, like, check your family, check your home. You have been robbed, right? And again, this is where Shakespeare's wordplay comes in. They're saying that the senator has been robbed, not literally, but he has been robbed of his most precious possession, which is his daughter Desdemona, because Desdemona is out with Othello, right? She's like seeing Othello right now. So out of all the stuff, Iago says probably the most famous line, and you might have not known this was Shakespeare, but he says to Senator Brad, he says, "Your daughter is, with Othello, and they're making the beast with two backs." Right? If you never knew where that expression comes from, it's from Shakespeare, right? All right, so that's where we're picking back up. So let's start with let's actually kind of rewind very quickly. Bottom of 1458 with Rodrigo. So Brab says, "This thou shalt answer. I know thee, Rodrigo." Um, he's basically saying, "Tell me if Iago is telling the truth about what's happening right now." So Rodrigo has kind of this longer response. We'll read some of it. He says, this says Rodrigo, line 116, bottom of 1458. "Sir, I will answer anything, but I beseech you, if it be your pleasure and most wise consent, as I partly find it is, that your fair daughter, at this odd even and dull watch of the night," saying about like midnight when everyone's sleepy, "transported with no worse nor better guard, but with the knave of common hare, a gondolier," which are the boats that they use to get through the waterways in Venice. Again, kind of look at this language that is being used when they refer to Othello. "To the gross clasps of a lascivious Moor," that's Othello, "would this be known to you and your allowance?" He's saying if you are aware of this and if you're allowing it, if you're giving Desdemona permission to do this, "we have then done you bold and saucy wrongs." He's saying if you already know about this and you're aware of it and you're okay with it, then you can punish Iago and Rodrigo because they're trying to yell at him and tell him something that he already knows and that he's okay with. So he's saying if you know this and if you're allowing it, then we apologize, right? If we're telling you something you already know and approve of. But if you know not this, if you don't know, "my manners tell me we have your wrong rebuke. Do not believe that, from the sense of all civility, I thus would play and trifle with your reverence." He's like, "Don't think I would just be saying this just for no reason, right?" He's like, "I understand how revered you are, and I understand your time is valuable, right?" Says, "I won't trifle with your reverence. Your daughter, if you have not given her leave," which he means permission, "I say again, have made a gross revolt." So he's saying if you did not allow Desdemona to do this, then she has made a very brazen revolt against you in her actions, tying her duty, beauty, wit, and fortunes in an extravagant and wheeling stranger. Again, referring to Othello, he is a stranger of here and everywhere. He says straight, which means immediately, immediately satisfy yourself. If she be in your chamber or your house, let loose on me the justice of the state for thus deluding you. Right? So in all those words, Rodrigo says, if I'm lying to you and we're making this up, or if this is something that you are aware of and you're okay with it, then you can get us in trouble for bothering you. But he says, we think that this information that we're telling you is worth your time and you want to listen to us. That's what he's saying. Okay. So Brad turns to his servants that live. He says, "Strike the tinder." He says, "Get a light. Call me a taper. Get me a candle. Call up all my people. This accident is not unlike my dream. Belief of it oppresses me already. Light, I say, light." So we see here that Senator Brab was like already having some kind of idea about this. He says that he was dreaming that something like this might be happening, and then Rodrigo and Iago are kind of saying this, right? They're kind of confirming his suspicions from his dream. Okay. Here it says Iago to Rodrigo. Iago is saying, "I must leave." He says, "Farewell, I must leave you." So on and so on. Basically, I'll just sum up this little speech where he says, "All right, Rodrigo, we've set this plan in motion. Now I have to scurry over to Othello and then basically lie to him about what's happening." Okay, so here on line 140, toward the bottom of page 1459, where this says Iago to Rodrigo, I'm just going to sum up all of this of what he says here from lines 140 to about line 155 before Iago exits. He basically says, "Okay, Rodrigo, our plan is in motion. Now I have to leave. I have to run over to Othello and basically play both sides, right?" So what he has essentially done is kind of kick the hornet's nest. He's kind of kicked the hornet's nest here by telling Senator Brab, who is Desdemona's father, that Othello is seeing Desdemona. So what he has to do now is run over to Othello and catch him before anyone else can and say, "Oh crap, Othello, people are coming for you because they know about you and Desdemona." So look at how Iago is trying to play both sides here, right? So let's actually just read some of these lines here. He says, Iago to Rodrigo, farewell, for I must leave you. It seems not meet nor wholesome to my place to be produced. If I stay, as if I stay, I shall against the more. So what he's saying here is it would not be good for me to stick around right now because if I do, then it'll show as evidence that I'm against Othello, right? And he doesn't want that to be the case. He wants Othello to think that he is on his side. So he's basically saying, I've got to leave because if I'm caught here, that'll make me look like I'm against Othello. And he doesn't want that to happen. He wants Othello to think that he is still on his side, right? He says that here produced means presented as witness. So it says if he is seen here, then he would be presented as witness against the Moor, and he doesn't want that to happen. He wants Othello to think he's still on his side. For I do not know the state, which means Venice. However, this may gall him with some check, which means reprimand. Cannot with safety cast, which means dismiss him, for he is embarked, which means committed, with such loud reason to the Cyprus Wars. Okay, so this is some background information. Um, Venice is at war with the Turks in Cyprus. Okay, so this is important because remember, Othello is like the general of the Venetian army, right? So they have to go to Cyprus to fight the Turks. That's what it's talking about here, where it says Cyprus Wars, which even now stand in act, which means taking place, that for their souls, to save their souls, another of his fathom, which means another of Othello's caliber, since he's such a great warrior, they have none to lead their business, in which regard, though I do hate him, he's talking again about hating Othello, though I do hate him as I do hell pains, yet for necessity of present life, which means livelihood, I must show out a flag and a sign of love, which is indeed but a sign, right? He's saying that even though I hate Othello, I have to pretend like I don't hate Othello. I have to show this sign, which he says just is a sign of love, but it's not true, right? Flag and a sign of love, which is indeed but a sign that you shall surely find him to lead of the Sagarity, which means awaken searchers of these people who are trying to look for him now. There I will be with him. Okay. So he's saying that when this search party finds Othello, the search party that he and Rodrigo have started, he is going to make sure he's with Othello. Remember, he's kind of like a chess master, right? So he has set these events into motion, and now he says, Rodrigo, I've got to leave because I got to go make it look like I'm actually on Othello's side right now. So he's like, gotta skedaddle, gotta go, gotta make sure I find Othello before this search party that he incited finds Othello, so he can pretend like he's on his side once the party finds him. So you can see Iago's trickery here. Okay, so moving on. Let's get to the next big part that we need to go to. I think we can skip the rest of these few speeches here in scene one. So, Act 1, Scene 2, it says, Another street in Venice, before Othello's lodging, enter Othello, Iago in attendance with torches. So, we don't actually get to see any of Othello until Scene 2 of Act 1. So, here he is. So now Iago has run over to find Othello, right? It says here in front of his lodging. Iago has the first lines of Scene 2 in Act 1. He says, Though in the trade of war I have slain men, yet do I hold off the very stuff of the conscious, which means the essence of the conscious, to do no contrived, which means premeditated murder. I lack iniquity, sometime to do me service. 9 or 10 times I thought the have yerked, which means struck with a dagger, him here under the ribs. So again, right, this is where Shakespeare shows how good of a writer he is, right? What Iago is saying here in the first lines of Act 1, Scene 2, he says, to Othello, he's like, I could never do premeditated murder. Um, Again, a lot of foreshadowing. He says, though in the trade of war he has killed men, it was never premeditated, right? So again, think about what Iago is trying to do here. He's not literally trying to murder Othello, but he is trying to basically kill Othello's reputation. So again, he's kind of telling on himself here, but since he's using this kind of double speak, which Shakespeare is so famous for, he's saying it without actually saying it, right? So that's what this means. So Othello, his very first lines of the play is just a quick response. "'Tis better as it is." Iago, nay, but he prated and spoke such scurvy and provoking terms against your honor, that with the little godliness I have, I did full hard forbear him. But I pray you, sir, are you fast married? He's saying, are you legitimately married? Because be assured of this, that the Magnifico is much beloved and hath in his effect a voice potential, which means powerful, as double the Duke's. He will divorce you or put upon you the restraint or grievance, the law, with all his might to enforce on it, will give him cable, which means rope, right? So basically, Iago is asking about Othello's relationship status with Desdemona and the negative implications that it can have in the society that they're in currently, right? So Othello responds to this, right? Says, let him do his spite, right? He's like, let them do whatever spiteful actions they want. That's kind of what he's saying here. My services which I have done to the seniority, like the seniors, right? The sirs, the duke, they'll out-tongue his complaints, right? So basically, he's saying that even if the Duke and the other politicians don't agree with Othello's relationship with Desdemona, he's saying that whatever complaints they have, um, Othello's works of service shall out-tongue the complaints. He's saying that the actions he has done for the state of Venice are so significant that it will outweigh any complaints that they have towards Othello. 'Tis yet to know which when I know that boasting is an honor, I shall promulgate. I fetch my life in being from men of royal siege, and my detriments may speak unbonneted to as proud a fortune as this that I have reached. For no Iago, but that I love gentle Desdemona. So we get kind of the first time that Othello confesses his love for Desdemona. So keep this in mind. Throughout the play, Othello's love for Desdemona is 100% real. It's 100% sincere. It's 100% genuine. Uh, Desdemona and Othello love each other like without any mistake to, right? They very genuinely and very sincerely do love each other. That's a very important thing to keep in mind throughout the play. I would not my unhoused free condition put in circumscription and confined for the sea's worth. Basically, right there, Othello is just saying, I love Desdemona so much that nothing is gonna like take it away, right? So now we have our first appearance of Michael Cassio. So those, Iago says, those are the raised father and sorry, before that, it says, enter Cassio and his officers with torches. But look, what lights come yond with Iago. Those are the raised father and his friends. You are best to go in. So the raised father is again talking about Senator Brab, Desdemona's dad, and his friends, right? This is the search party that has come to find Othello. The search party, again, that Iago has set in motion. So look at how he's trying to play both sides here, right? So he went and found Othello and talked to him before the party could arrive. And now he's trying to play both sides of the field here. He says, Othello, you were best to go in. Like, go away so the party doesn't see you. Othello doesn't do that. Okay. Othello says in response, not I must be found. My parts, my title, my perfect soul, He says, my qualities and my clear conscience shall manifest me rightly. Is it they? My Janus, I think no. That's Iago's response. This Othello, the servants of the dukes and my lieutenant. Uh, Again, remember Michael Cassio is the lieutenant. So when he says "and my lieutenant?" question mark, he's asking is Michael Cassio there. He, but he's not mad at them. Look at how he greets them. He says, "The goodness of the night upon you, friends." He calls them all friends. What is the news? Michael Cassio speaks first. He says, "The Duke does greet you, General." So again, Othello is the general. Michael Cassio is the newly elected lieutenant. So Michael Cassio is telling Othello that the Duke wants to talk to him. He says, "The Duke does greet you, General, and he requires your post haste appearance, even on the instant." Othello says, "What is the matter, think you?" Cassio says, "Something from Cyprus, as I may divine. It is a business of some heat in the galleys. Have a dozen secret messengers this very night at one another's heels, and many of the councils raised and met are at the Duke's already. You have been hotly called for. When being not at your lodging to be found, the Senate has sent three several quests to search you out." Othello says, "'Tis well I am found by you. I will but spend a word here in the house and go with you." He exits. So Cassio starts talking to Iago. So bottom of 1461, Cassio says, "Ensign, what makes he here?" Right? So Iago says, top of 1462, "Faith, he tonight hath boarded a land carrack." It says a large merchant ship. "If it prove a lawful prize, he made it forever." Cassio says, "I do not understand." Iago says, quite simply, "He's married." Cassio, "To who?" Iago, "Married to." Othello comes in and cuts him out. Um, and he says, so Othello enters again, cutting off Iago, and he kind of redirects his attention. Iago says, "Come, Captain, will you go?" And Othello says, "Have with you," which means let's go. Before Cassio, Iago, and Othello can leave, they get cut off by Senator Brab, Rodrigo, and the officers. So it says, "Enter Brab, Rodrigo, and officers with torches." Cassio says, "Here comes another troop to seek for you." Iago, "It is Brabenzano. General, be advised. He comes to bad intent." So again, why does he come to bad intent? Because of what Iago did, right? So, again, I just want you to pay attention here to how Iago is trying to um, play Othello's friend, but also playing to this crowd of Senator Brab and the officers that have come because Iago and Rodrigo have given them this news, and they were going to search out Othello because of it, right? So this is not a happy crowd, right? They have come to find Othello because Iago and Rodrigo have told Senator Brab that essentially Othello has eloped with Desdemona, the senator's daughter, right? So he's not too happy about that, and he's come to find Othello. Okay, so here we see their interaction. And again, look at how Othello is like no one's enemy right now. He says, "Hola, hola, stand there," to Brab and Rodrigo. Rodrigo says, again, they never really refer to him as his name. I said, "Senor, it is the Moor." Senator Brab's immediate reaction, "Down with him, thief." He's not very happy with Othello right now, right? Because he has gone with his daughter. Iago, drawing. They draw swords, right? This is a really funny scene in the movie because the way they all draw their swords. Iago, drawing. "You, Rodrigo, come, sir, I am for you." Othello, "Heap up your bright swords, for the dew will rust them." I love that line. That's one of my favorite lines from Othello here in this early part of the play. Again, remember how good of a soldier and how good of a warrior Othello is. He is not scared by any of this. He literally tells these people, it says, "Keep up your bright swords." He says, "Put them away," because he knows they're not going to do anything with them, right? So I absolutely love this line here. So let's read it one more time. This is line 57 in scene 2 here, middle of 1462. "Keep up your bright swords, for the dew will rust them." So again, translating that line, essentially Othello says to put away your swords because all they're going to do is collect rust from the dew, right? He knows that these people aren't going to do anything with these swords. He's not scared at all. So he turns to Senator Brab. He says, "Good Senor, you shall command more. Sorry, good Senor, you shall command more with years than with your weapons." Othello is kind of a badass, right? So he basically straight up says to Senator Brab that the senator's wisdom and age is much more threatening than him with a weapon, right? He says, "Put away your sword because you're not going to do anything with that. If you really want to command my attention, then use your age and your wisdom instead of threatening me with the sword," right? That's what he says there. And Brab is still mad, so Senator Brabenzano hears, "O foul thief, where hast thou stowed my daughter? Damned as thou art, thou hast enchanted her." So I want you to see the kind of language that Senator Brab is using, right? He's saying that Othello, the only way that he could have taken Desdemona is through enchanting, right? He says, "Thou hast enchanted her." For I'll refer me to all things of sense, and if she in chains of magic were not bound, whether a maid so tender, so fair and happy, so opposite, says so opposed to marriage, that she shunned the wealthy curled darling of our nation. Again, kind of a little bit of racist talk here, right? So Senator Brab is saying, my daughter could not possibly have married you, Othello, because she was always so opposed to marriage with other Venetians, right? He's saying that Desdemona never was interested in marrying anyone else from Venice. So if she was never interested in marrying those people, why on earth would she want to marry Othello? He cannot understand this, right? So right here where it says around line one, or sorry, just 67, 68, toward the bottom of 1462, right? If she in chains of magic were not bound, whether a maid so tender, fair, and happy, saying Desdemona is a very, very desirable woman, right? He knows this about his daughter. Um, but so opposite to marriage that she shunned the wealthy, curled darling, which means darlings of our nation. Again, other Venetians, she had no interest in marrying them, but she wants to marry Othello, apparently, would ever have to incur a general mock, which means ridicule, run from her guardiage to the sooty bosom of such a thing as thou. Again, some kind of troubling racist language calling Othello's heart black, right? Sooty bosom, which, soot, it makes stuff black. So he says that Desdemona has run from her guardage, which is, him, which is Senator Brab, to the sooty bosom of such a thing as thou, to fear, not to delight. Judge me the world if 'tis not gross in the sense that thou hast practiced on her with foul charms, abused her delicate use with drugs or minerals that wakened the motion, I'll have it disputed on, 'tis probable and palpable to thinking, I therefore apprehend and do attach thee, which means arrest, for an abuser of the world, a practicer of arts, inhibited in and out of warrant. To the officers, lay hold upon him. If he do resist, subdue him to his peril. So Senator Brab is not very happy right now, right? He is saying that you have enchanted my daughter. You have stolen her from me. There's no way she could want to marry you when she did not want to marry Venetians. She was opposed to it. And I'm so mad about it that I'm going to have you arrested. Right. So, top of 1463. Othello, again, totally not afraid of any of this, totally not amused. He literally tells him to stop. He says, "Hold your hands, both of you of my inclining and the rest." He tells everyone to stop, right? Because a fight is about to happen, right? He says, "The people who follow me and the people who are trying to get me right now, everyone just stop." Right? He says, "Stop." Were it my cue to fight, I should have known it without a prompter. Again, he's a badass. I love when he talks like this. He says, if I was going to fight, I would have been fighting already. This is not going to be a fight. He says, this is no fight. If it had been, he would have already been fighting, right? He would have known it without a prompter. It says to Brabenzano, whither will you that I go to answer this your charge? He says, where do you want me to go in order to talk about this, right? Where should I go? Where do you want me to go to answer your charge? Again, Brabenzano is not very happy. It says, to prison, till at fit time of law and course of direct session, call thee to answer. Basically, he says you should go to jail until a court trial, right? Othello says, what if I do obey? Right? Again, he's very sassy and I love it. He says, what if I do? What if I obey you? What happens then? What if I do? Again, I just love how he's saying here, right? Okay, imagine if, hypothetically speaking, I do obey these commands. He's just saying so outright, I'm not going to do that. But what if I did, right? How may the Duke be wherewith satisfied, whose messengers are here about my side upon some present business of the state to bring him to me? So remember, this is where Michael Cassio had come in earlier and says the Duke wants to see you, Othello. So remember, in the hierarchy of things, Senator Brab is a senator, so he's down here. The Duke is up here. Everyone has to answer to the Duke, right? So Othello is basically saying, okay, well, that's nice that you want to do that, but the Duke has summoned me. I got to go there instead. Uh, so the officer here says, "'Tis true, most worthy Signor. The Duke's in council, and your noble self, I'm sure, is sent for." Brabenzano says, "How? The Duke in council, in this time of night? Bring him away. Mine's not an idle cause. The Duke himself, or any of my brothers of the state, excuse me, cannot but feel this wrong 'twas their own. For if such actions may have passage free, bond slaves and pagans shall our statesmen be." So again, you get a little bit of rhyming here. Shakespeare, was also a very famous poet, one of the most famous poets ever. So even in his plays, right, he does throw in some of that poetic rhyming, right? But basically, Provenzano says here at the very end of Act 1, Scene 2, he says, okay, we'll go to the Duke. Basically, he's like, yeah, Othello, you're really in trouble now because even though the Duke has asked to see you, once we get into the chamber of the Duke, that says here Venetian council room, you can see what the Duke wanted you for, but also while we're there, I'm going to tell him what you did to my daughter, and you're going to be in trouble. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, uh-oh, Othello, now you're really going to be in trouble because not only am I going to be after you, but once I tell the Duke, he's going to be after you too, right? All right, so Act 1, Scene 3. A Venetian council room, enter Duke, first and second senators and officers, blah, blah, blah. So it says, let's skip ahead some. Mainly in this, they are talking about the military plan that they have to where they have to go to Cyprus, right? So we can skip a lot of this because it's not super important. It's just them giving more background information about their battle with Cyprus and what their plans are. So you can essentially skip over to 1465 where it says enter Brabenzano, Othello, Cassio, Iago, Rodrigo, and officers, right? So our main cast of characters are kind of all here except for Desdemona, right? So Act 1, Scene 3, we are in the Venetian council room. We skipped past a lot of the stuff that we don't really need. And then now we're kind of picking back up where the plot and everything is going to keep continuing here, right? So the Duke says, Valiant Othello, we must straight employ you against the general enemy, Ottoman. To Provenzano, I did not see you. Welcome, gentle senor. We lacked your counsel and your help tonight. Provenzano, so did I yours. Good your grace, pardon me. Neither my place nor aught I heard of business hath raised me from my bed, nor doth the general care take hold on me for my particular grief. If is of so floodgate and o'erbearing nature that it engluts and swallows other sorrows and is still itself. So basically, you can see how ridiculous really Provenzano is being here, right? He's saying, okay, Duke, I know that you are currently talking about the military strategy and how we're going to fight the Ottomans in Cyprus, but fellow has married my daughter without me knowing, and he basically is saying that he thinks that that is as worthy of a problem as what they were talking about already, right? So Senator Brab is definitely being very entitled and very much a crybaby right now when he's saying that, oh, Duke and my fellow senators, I have such a terrible problem, and I'm going to tell you all about it now. So, that's the way I read it, at least, that he is being very, very much a baby right now and very entitled, thinking that his personal problems are as important as everything else that's happening. So let's see what happens, okay? So, Duke, why? What's the matter? Brabanzano, my daughter, oh, my daughter. Senators come in and they say, dead? Sometimes the way that Shakespeare does his stuff is kind of funny, right? How they just pop in and go, "Oh, she must be dead if he's this sad," right? But again, that's just funny to me, where he says, "My daughter, oh my daughter," there, sorry, my daughter, oh my daughter, and then first and second senators dead. Brabanzano, I, to me, she is abused, stolen from me, and corrupted by spells and medicines brought of mountebanks. For nature so preposterously to err, being not deficient, blind, or lame of sense, stands witchcraft could not. So again, look at this language that Senator Brab is using. He is accusing Othello of using spells, like literally using like magic enchantments in order to win Desdemona. And that's where he is trying to make this case that it's like a crime, right? He's like, you've committed a crime against me and my daughter because you have won her over using enchantment, spells, and magic. He literally thinks Othello has used magic, right? That's not a hyperbole. He literally thinks that he has used like magical spells in order to win over Desdemona, right? He says that witchcraft is the only way that this could have happened. Sans witchcraft could not, right? Duke, whoever he be that in this foul proceeding hath thus beguiled your daughter of herself and you of her, the bloody book of law you shall read in the bitter letter after your own sense, yea, though a proper son stood in your action. So the Duke is basically saying, okay, if this is true, then this guy will be in trouble if this is true. Brabanzano, humbly I thank your grace. Here is the man, this more, whom now it seems your special mandate for the state affairs hath hither brought. So the Duke says to Othello, and what in your own part can you say of this? So basically the Duke is saying, okay, Othello, tell us your side of the story. Tell us your side. Brabanzano tries to interrupt. He says, nothing, but this is so. Othello again is not going to have this. He's like, no, if you're going to try to throw me under the bus here, I'm going to defend myself, right? So he says, most potent, grave, and reverence in yours. So this is some more kind of very important lines here. So this is Othello's first big speech, right? So whenever we talk about Othello, whenever we're talking about Shakespeare plays, we want to talk about important speeches, right? So here, starting at the bottom of 1465, this is a very important speech from Othello. Okay, so Act One, Scene Three, line 75, okay, in the book here. Most potent, grave, and reverence in yours, my very noble and approved good masters, that I have taken away this old man's daughter, it is most true. True, I have married her. The very head and front of my offending hath this extent no more. Rude I am in my speech, which means he's unpolished in speech, which I disagree with. I think he's very good at speaking. But he's kind of humble. He's like, I am unpolished in my speech, and little blessed with the soft phrase of peace. For since these arms of mine had 7 years' pith, which means strength, till now, some 9 moons wasted. 9 months ago, they have used, which means perform, their dearest action in the tented field, which means out in the field of battle. And little of this great world can I speak, more than pertains to feats of broils and battle. So again, he's saying, I'm a fighter, I'm a soldier. This is really all I know, right? He's saying, I'm not an intellectual, I am not a politician. I'm a warrior. I'm a fighter. That's what he's saying right here, right? That's what he is familiar with. And therefore, little shall I grace my cause in speaking for myself. But he's going to speak for himself anyway, right? Yet by your gracious presence I will around an unvarnished tale deliver my whole course of love. What drugs, what charms, what conjuration, what mighty magic, for such proceedings I am charged withal. I won his daughter, right? He's saying, I didn't use magic. I won her. I won Desdemona's love, right? Through my actions, through spending time with her. I didn't cheat, right? I won her through my affections, and that's how I got Desdemona, right? So he's saying no witchcraft, no enchantments were used. I just won her because she fell in love with me, right? That's what he is defending himself as. So Robinzano, a maiden never bold, of spirit so still and quiet that her motion blushed at herself, and she, in spite of nature, of years of country, credit, everything, to fall in love with what she feared to look on. Again, talking about Othello. It is a judgment maimed and most imperfect that will confess perfection, so could err against the rules of all nature, and must be driven to find out practices of cunning hell why this should be. I therefore vouch again that with some mixture powerful o'er the blood, or with some dram conjured to this effect, he wrought upon her. So Brabazon like, I don't believe you still. You did something to Desdemona in order for her to be with you, right? You said you had some powerful mixture that had an effect over the blood, right? The Duke says to vouch this is no proof without more wider and more overt test than these thin habits and poor likelihoods and modern seeming to prefer against him. He's saying that this is not enough evidence, right? You don't have any good evidence here. It says, First Senator, but Othello speak. Do you by indirect forced courses subdue or poison this young maid's affections, or came it by request, in such fair question as a soul to a soul affordeth? Othello, I do beseech you, send for the lady to Sagrati, and let her speak of me before her father. If you do find me foul in her report, the office I do hold of you, not only take away, but let your sentence even fall upon my life. He's saying, bring in Desdemona and let her tell you, right? Um, hear it from her, right? Why are we talking for Desdemona? Let her come in, let her speak for herself, right? So the officer or Duke says to the officers, fetch Desdemona hither. Othello, ensign, conduct them. You best know the place. So he's saying to Iago, who is his ensign, go help the officers find Desdemona. You know where she's at. And it says here, until she come, truly as to heaven, I do confess the vices of my blood, which means sins of passion. So justly to your grave ears, I'll present how I did thrive in this fair lady's love, and she in mine. He's like, while we're waiting on Iago and the officers to go get Desdemona, I'm going to give you more information, right? The Duke says, say it, Othello. Her father loved me. This is another important speech here from Othello. Her father loved me, oft invited me, still questioned me the story of my life. From year to year, the battles, sieges, fortune that I have passed, I ran it through, even from my boyish days to the very moment that he bade me to tell it, wherein I spoke of most disastrous chances, of moving accidents by flood and field, of hairbreadth escapes, the imminent deadly breach, of being taken by the insolent foe and sold to slavery. My redemption and portents in my traveler's history, wherein the answers of vast and deserts idle, rough quarries, rocks, hills, whose heads touch heaven. It was my hint to speak, it was my process, and of the cannibals that each other eat, the ampathargai of and men whose heads grew beneath their shoulders. These things to hear would Desdemona seriously incline. Okay, so we see here in this speech from Othello on 1467 that Senator Brab and Othello used to be cool, right? He's saying, I used to tell Senator Brab about all of my adventures, right? That's what he's talking about here in the first part of the speech. He's saying, we used to spend time together, and I used to tell him about all of my crazy adventures in my time as a warrior and a soldier, right? And as he was telling this, Desdemona says here, would Desdemona seriously incline, about line 145, and it means eagerly lean, right? So Desdemona would be listening to these stories that Othello was telling. But still the house affairs would draw her hence, which ever as she could with haste dispatch, she'd come again with a greedy ear, devour up my discourse, which means she would love to listen to Othello talk about this stuff, right? Which I, observing, took once a pliant hour, and found good means to draw her from a prayer of earnest heart, that I would all my pilgrimage dilate, which means relate, sorry, dilate, relate, right? Whereof by parcels she had something heard, but not instinctively I did consent, and often did beguile her of her tears, when I did speak of some distressful stroke, sorry, that my youth suffered. Basically, he's saying here that when he was telling Desdemona one on one about these adventures he would have, if there was ever a time where he came close to death, it would make her cry, right? So he's saying anytime I was telling a story and something happened where I almost died, it would make Desdemona cry as I was telling it, right? Often did beguile her of her tears when I did speak of some distressful stroke that my youth suffered. My story being done, she gave me for my pains a world of kisses, right? So you can see here that Othello opened up his heart to Desdemona, and she eagerly listened to it all and was kind of like enraptured in Othello's stories and understood his suffering, right? Desdemona understood the pain and suffering that Othello has been through in his life. And it says, when he was done with this story, she gave me for my pains a world of kisses. That's about line 150, 159. She swore in faith, this is Desdemona talking here in this flashback. She swore, in faith 'twas strange, 'twas passing strange, which means exceptionally strange, she wished that she had not heard it, yet she wished that heaven had made her such a man. So it's saying that on one hand, Desdemona wishes that she had not heard these awful stories, but on the other hand, she like has a perfect man now in Othello. She thanks me and bade me, if I had a friend that loved her, I would I should but teach him how to tell my story, and that would woo her. Upon this hint I spake, she loved me for my dangers I had passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. This is the only witchcraft I have used. This is kind of like his mic drop moment. He's like, if you want to know what witchcraft I used to win over Desdemona, I just told you, drop the mic, walk out, right? That's kind of what he did here, right? So let's make sure we get the rest of this. So Desdemona comes in, right? And the Duke says, it says, enter Desdemona, Iago in attendance. Here comes the lady. Let her witness it. That's Othello still speaking. The Duke, I think this tale would win my daughter too. Ouch, right? He says, guess what, Brab? Yeah, I would let my daughter marry Othello, right? That's what he says here. I think this tale would win my daughter too. Good Brabanzano, take up this mangled manner at the best. Men do their broken weapons rather use than their bare hands, right? Brabanzano, pray you hear her speak. If she confesses that she was half the wooer, destruction on my head, if bad blame, light on the man to Desdemona. Come hither, gentle mistress. Do you perceive in all this noble company where you most owe obedience? So one thing I want you to be thinking about here is the kind of way Desdemona is treated and the way that she reacts to things, right? A lot of the time when people write about Othello, they write about the female characters, right? They will write about Desdemona, who is Othello's wife, and they'll write about Amelia, who is Iago's wife, right? So be thinking about the role of Desdemona and how she kind of operates within the midst of all of these male characters, right? So Desdemona finally gets to come in to speak. This is about line 179 on 1468. My noble father, I do perceive here a divided duty. That's kind of a important opening line, right? She has a divided duty to her father, but also to Othello. So she is divided, right? She feels divided, a divided duty. To you I am bound for life and education. My life and education both do learn me how to respect you. You are the lord of duty. I am hereto your daughter, but here's my husband, Othello, right? And much so duty as my mother showed to you, preferring you before her father, so much I challenge that I may profess due to the more my lord. Ouch. What did Desdemona just say? She says, "Hey, Dad, remember how Mom was, right? It says right here, so much at duty as my mother showed to you, preferring you before her father." Damn, that kind of cuts deep, right? She says, "This shouldn't be anything new to you. Like, don't be a hypocrite, right? Remember how much mom preferred you over what her father wanted her to do?" So that's kind of a deep cut that Desdemona just put right there. Brabantano, God be with you, I have done. To the Duke, plead at your grace to the state affairs. I'd rather adopt a child than get it. So it says, I would rather adopt a child than beget it. To Othello, come hither more. I here do give thee that with all my heart, which, but thou hast already with all my heart. I would keep thee, I would keep from thee. It says, to Desdemona, for your sake, Jewel, I am glad at soul I have no other child. For thy escape would teach me tyranny, to hang clogs on them to the Duke. I have done, my lord Duke. Let me speak like yourself and lay a sentence which is as a grace, or sorry, grease, or step may help these lovers. When remedies are past, these griefs are ended by seeing the worse, which late on hopes depended. Blah blah blah. So let's skip to the end here. So let's see. Basically, um, they are like, okay, so Desdemona and Othello can be together, whatever. We need to get back to talking about the Turks of Cyprus, right? So 1469, they basically start talking about military strategy again. So Othello says here towards the bottom, the tyrant custom, most grave senators, hath made the flinty and steel coach of war my thrice driven bed of down. I do agonize and natural and prompt alacrity. I find my hardness and do undertake this present war against the Ottomites. Most humbly, therefore, bending at your state, I crave fit disposition for my wife, Desdemona, due to reference of place and exhibition with such accommodation and besort as levels with her breeding. Essentially, Othello is saying, I will go to Cyprus and battle the Turks, I will battle the Ottomites, but I want to take Desdemona with me. That's what he's saying, right? So let's see here. So, top of 1471, Duke says, what would you, Desdemona? Desdemona says, I think you might see Turbo in the background. Desdemona says, that I love the more to live with him, my downright violence and storm of fortitudes may trumpet to the world. My heart subdued, even to the very quality of my lord, I saw Othello's visage in his mind, and to his honors and his valiant parts did I my soul and fortunes consecrate, so that, dear lords, if I be left behind a moth of peace, and he go to war, the rights for why I love him are bereft me, and a heavy interim shall support by his dear absence. Let me go with him. Right? So Othello says, let her have your voice, vouch with me, heaven. I therefore beg it not to please the palate of my appetite, nor to comply with the heat of the young effects and my defunct and proper satisfaction, but to be free and bounteous to her mind, and heaven defend your good souls that you think. I will your serious and great business scant when she is with me. No, when light winged toys of feathered blah blah blah, Cupid's seal, so on and so on. They're just saying if we're gonna send Othello to Cyprus, can Desdemona come with, right? And basically, uh, the Duke's response, because they need his permission. The Duke says here on line 272, I guess, be it as you shall privately determine, either for her to stay or going. The affair cries haste, and speed must answer it. He's like, whatever. If Desdemona wants to go with you, that's fine. We just need you to get to Cyprus because this is urgent, right? Othello says, with all my heart, Duke, bottom of page 1470. At 9 in the morning, here we'll meet again. Othello leaves some officer behind, and he shall our commission bring to you, and such things else of quality and respect as doth import you, blah blah blah. Othello says, so please your grace, my ensign, he's talking about Iago. This is important right here. My ensign, a man of honesty, or it says, a man he is of honesty and trust, to his conveyance I assign my wife, with what else need fill your good grace shall think to be sent after me. So Othello still thinks Iago is on his side, right? He's calling his ensign, who is Iago, a man of honesty and trust, and he's trusting Desdemona with Iago. Duke says, "Let it be so. Good night to everyone." This is very important right here. The small little line that where it says to Brabantano. The Duke says, "And noble Signor, if virtue no delighted beauty lack, your son-in-law is far more fair than black." That's kind of like a good and bad thing, what he just said, right? He is giving um his kind of stamp of approval on Othello to Senator Brab, but the way he says it is really problematic, right? Where he says your son-in-law is far more fair than black. He's saying essentially, your son-in-law is more white than he is black, but he's saying it in this way of like a compliment, right? So it's a really kind of like backhanded and messed up compliment, but in a way he's saying like, you know, you should give the stamp of approval to Othello, right? So another thing that you can write about, as we're finishing up this video, I want you to be thinking about things you can write about, right? So I already mentioned the role of the women, right? The role of Desdemona and Emilia, but also the role of race in this play, right? This play is you can write so much about the concept of race and how these other characters react to Othello. Because remember, he's the only one here that isn't white. Everyone else is white. So if you're kind of thinking about you can write a literary analysis on how is race portrayed in this play? How does Shakespeare address race? In the year 15, I always forget, but this play is hundreds and hundreds of years old, and it's talking about these kinds of things, right? It's talking about racism, right? So keep that in mind. So Brabantano turns to Othello. This is kind of top of 1471. Look to her more. If thou hast eyes to see, she has deceived her father and may thee, right? That's another very kind of troubling line. He's like, my daughter has lied to you. She can lie, or so, he says, my daughter has lied to me. So what would stop her from lying to you? Be thinking about this. This becomes very, very important later on in the play, where Othello doesn't trust Desdemona anymore, right? And this is kind of, you know, coincidental because Iago really has nothing to do with this, but very sinisterly, Provenzano here toward the end of Act 1, Scene 3 plants this seed in Othello's brain that my daughter might lie to you, right? Says, my daughter deceived me, she might do the same thing to you, so watch out. Othello's response. Othello is so sincere and genuine. He says, my life upon her faith. He says, I will rest the fate of my life upon Desdemona's faith, right? So it says they all leave. Blah blah blah. Let's see if there's anything else we need to do here. We don't really need to worry about the finishing conversation between Iago and Rodrigo. Just know that everyone, all of our main characters, are leaving Venice, and in Act 2, Scene 1, they're going to Cyprus, okay? So again, this video is already right at an hour long, so let's stop there for tonight. Before I go, one of our classmates, Kayla, has shared the Spark Notes for Othello. So she says the Spark Notes are very good, they're free. So I'm going to send those along to you as well. Again, I don't care if you use that kind of stuff when we're talking about Othello. The only thing I really care about is that you understand what's happening at the play. Okay. So let's go ahead and stop there for tonight. Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving, and I will see you next week, and we'll keep going with Othello. Okay.